I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would happen in a courthouse, especially not in front of my son. The morning light poured through the skylight of the county clerk's office, that soft, filtered Oregon sun that makes everything look more peaceful than it is. But inside the hallway, everything felt hard and sterile. The tile beneath my boots clicked too loud. My palms wouldn't stop sweating. And Eli, my 9-year-old, held onto my hand like he knew more than he should have. I told him we wouldn't be long. I told him this was just paperwork, but I lied. I hadn't even made it past the front desk when I heard my father's voice, loud, deliberate, and sharp enough to slice through drywall. She used a veteran to get sympathy. My stomach dropped. My breath caught like a fist in my chest. The receptionist froze mid-sentence. Lana, my attorney and oldest friend, turned to me slowly. I didn't have to ask who he meant. There was only one veteran in this story and only one person they thought would stoop that low. I glanced at Eli, who didn't look confused, just tired. This wasn't his first taste of family drama. He squeezed my fingers once like he was telling me to breathe. Let me back up. My name is Maren Keene. I'm 37. I work as a freelance architectural designer. Nothing glamorous, just zoning layouts and land use assessments mostly. After my divorce, I moved back to rural Oregon with Eli to care for the only man in my life who never lied to me, my grandfather, Elliot Keene. He was a Korean War vet civil engineer and the most stubbornly dignified man I've ever known. When his health started failing, no one else stepped up. Not my parents, Roy and Meredith, who lived 2 towns over but claimed they were too busy. Not my brother Declan, who only called when he needed something notarized. So I packed my things, took Eli out of his magnet school, and moved us into the drafty old farmhouse my grandfather built by hand. We gave him baths. We managed his meds. Eli read to him every night. That house was not a burden, it was a promise. And now they were telling the court I manipulated a dying man into rewriting his will. The doors to the meeting room swung open. I stepped inside Lana by my side. My parents and Declan were seated already surrounded by suits. Declan gave me that smirk he wears when he's pretending to be in control. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father stared like he was watching an intruder break in through the window. "You're not part of this?" "Marin," he said without greeting. "Please don't make this more difficult than it already is." I took the empty chair across from him. "I'm his granddaughter," I said. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." The document in question, their attorney interrupted tapping a manila folder, was produced after Mr. Keene's health declined. We believe it was created under pressure. Our clients will be submitting evidence to that effect. And we'll be submitting our own, Lana said calmly, setting down a flash drive and a printed transcript. The judge raised her eyebrows. "Let's proceed in order." As they opened with their case photos of Elliot looking frail statements from a neighbor who hadn't even stepped inside the house in years, I watched my mother finally glance up. She didn't look angry. She looked embarrassed, as if it was my presence, not their lies, that had soiled the room. Lana leaned toward me and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded once. But inside I was breaking into pieces, so small I couldn't count them. Because I wasn't just here to defend a will. I was here to defend the last 4 years of my life. The nights I sat beside Elliot's bed while he told stories about building bridges in Seoul. The mornings Eli brought him coffee and saluted him like a little soldier. I was here to defend my son's only real father figure, the man they all abandoned, and I knew something they didn't. Elliot had left me more than just a document. He left me a digital folder labeled Maren Only. In it, there was a video recorded just 4 months before his death where he looked into the camera and said, "If they try to fight this, don't argue, just show them the truth." I wasn't going to argue, I was going to show them the truth, and I knew when I did, everything would fall apart. The house didn't creak when it settled. It exhaled. Long, weary sighs through the floorboards in winter, low groans through the rafters when rain rolled off the roof. I used to think it was haunted as a kid, but now, having lived inside it again as an adult, I know better. The house wasn't haunted, it was alive. Grandpa Elliot built it himself in the early 1960s, out past the edge of our small Oregon town where pine met gravel and the streetlights gave up trying. He was meticulous an engineer through and through. Every joint, every angle, every nail sunk into the frame had a reason. It was the kind of place that wasn't just built, it was meant. Meant to last. Meant to hold things. Like a granddaughter and her son who had nowhere else to go. We moved in during Eli's first year of elementary school after I left my ex-husband and finally admitted the city wasn't working for us. My parents told me it was a mistake, that I'd regret stepping backward in life into some caretaker role, but they didn't offer to help Grandpa either, and Declan, he hadn't even returned Elliot's birthday call in 3 years. So I packed up my drafting boards and Eli's Star Wars lunchbox, and we came home. Back to the house that raised me. It looked the same mostly. The stone chimney still leaned ever so slightly east. The front steps still made that hollow thunk when you hit the third one from the top. And Elliot still sat in the kitchen in his robe by 6:00 a.m., sipping black coffee and pretending not to wait for company. At first, it was just basic stuff, light chores, grocery runs, making sure he took his meds. Then came the oxygen tank, the memory slips. The night I found him trying to fix the toaster at 3 a.m. in his boxers, convinced he was late for his old construction shift. That night, I locked away every tool in the garage. He didn't argue. He trusted me. Quietly, completely. And in return, I gave him what I could: dignity, routine, family. Eli gave him joy, too, the kind of joy that only comes from small, unexpected companionship. A boy who wanted to learn how to change a tire, a boy who brought a blanket and sat with him during Sunday football, even though he didn't understand the rules. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and I thought that meant something. Until this week, when I learned how replaceable real becomes once money's on the line. I was looking for Eli's school immunization card when I found it, the USB drive. It was tucked in the back of the old cigar box Elliot kept in his desk drawer, the one he told me don't mess with just old junk. I'd gone through that drawer dozens of times, but somehow missed it before. Maybe he'd slipped it in there, late after the last time I'd organized the files. Maybe he meant for me to find it only after he was gone. The label said simply, "For Marin." I plugged it into my laptop and stared at the contents. 3 files. One, a scanned letter with a notarized seal. One, a PDF labeled Keen Will Rev 3 signed, and the last, a video. My hands shook before I even clicked anything. The letter was straightforward, dated 11 months before Elliot passed. It revoked the prior will and stated that all assets, including the house vehicle and remaining bank holdings, were to be passed to me and my son for their years of personal care, love, and loyalty. It was signed, witnessed, and legally sound. The PDF matched. The new will, clean, precise, no ambiguity. And the video, I didn't watch it yet. I couldn't. Not then. Not while my parents were gathering lawyers to pretend that Elliot didn't know what he was doing, that I coerced him, that I used my son and his love for a grandfather to stage some elaborate emotional con. They could lie to the court, they could lie to themselves. But I had the truth in my hands, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The will reading took place in a cramped, beige-paneled office above the old bank downtown. The kind of space that hadn't changed since the 1980s, filing cabinets with rusting labels, a dusty ceiling fan turning slower than it should, and a receptionist who offered coffee but forgot the cream. The whole thing felt staged and stiff like a poorly lit high school play. I showed up 10 minutes early with a copy of Elliot's revised will in my bag and Eli's sketchbook in my hands. He wasn't with me this time. I'd left him with my friend Rachel for the afternoon. I didn't want him anywhere near what I knew was coming. Declan was already there, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone like this was some sort of lunch meeting. His suit was too sharp for the occasion. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than my rent. But the way he kept glancing at me without saying a word told me he wasn't as relaxed as he looked. My parents walked in just as the estate attorney, Mr. Gentry, began clearing his throat. Meredith's hair was perfectly set, not a strand out of place. Dad looked stern but hollow, like he hadn't slept or like he had, and it didn't help. They didn't acknowledge me. Not even a nod. "Thank you all for coming," Gentry began, unfolding a thick stack of papers. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Elliot Keene, dated July 14th, 2017. My stomach dropped. 2017. That was before I moved in, before Eli and I returned, before the nights of soup and pills and stories about the war, before I knew the names of all his medications by heart. I sat up straighter. Gentry read it out in full. The house and the land would be sold, proceeds split evenly between Roy Meredith and Declan. The old truck to Declan. A college savings bond already long expired to any future great-grandchildren. It was formal, detached, sterile. It sounded like a man planning a transition, not leaving a legacy. When he finished, Declan stretched his arms like he'd just finished yoga. My mother gave a small smile. My father folded his hands like a man satisfied with a job well done. And I spoke. I have a newer copy, I said, calm but clear. Signed, notarized, and dated 10 months before Elliot passed. It revokes the 2017 version. Mr. Gentry blinked. I wasn't made aware of any subsequent document. I have it with me, I said, pulling the manila folder from my bag and sliding it across the table. Declan didn't even look. It's fake, he said flatly. She doctored it. You haven't seen it? I replied. I don't need to, he said. You were living with him. You had access to his files, his accounts. Who's to say you didn't guide his hand? My fingers clenched against the armrest of my chair. Then my mother turned to me. Her voice was soft, almost kind. Marin, she said, like she was saying my name for the first time in years. Your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly by then. You know that. I looked her dead in the eye. He knew exactly what he was doing. And you knew exactly what you were avoiding. Gentry coughed awkwardly. I'll need to verify this with the court and determine if the new document supersedes the previous will. In the meantime, the estate will remain in probate. Declan laughed under his breath. Good luck with that. That's when I knew I was walking into something bigger than I thought. They weren't just upset, they were prepared. They knew this version existed, and they'd made damn sure it wasn't part of today's reading, which meant this wasn't going to be about grief or fairness. It was going to be about strategy. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I didn't go home. I sat in my car, pulled out my phone, and scrolled down to a number I hadn't called in years. Lana Chu. We met in college freshman year intro to civil law. She was sarcastic, brilliant, wore blazers to lectures before anyone else did. We drifted after graduation, different cities, different lives. Last I'd heard she was practicing probate and elder law in Portland. I hit dial, she picked up on the second ring. Chu. Hey, it's Marin Keene. A pause. Keene from Reed Hall. I smiled. The one and only. Wow, it's been, 15 years? At least. Listen, I need help. It's family. Another pause. But this one was shorter. Talk to me, she said. And just like that, I stopped feeling alone. Lana didn't say much that night. She took the files, promised to look through everything, and told me to get some rest. I've seen enough bad faith probates to know when someone's moving pieces before the game even starts, she'd said over a lukewarm bowl of piaho. But it wasn't until 2 days later that her voice really changed. She called just after 7 p.m. I was finishing dishes, Eli curled up with his math homework in the living room. The phone buzzed on the counter, and when I saw Lana's name, I wiped my hands on a towel and answered on speaker. Tell me you're sitting down, she said without a greeting. I laughed, nervous. Now I am. I pulled title records on the house. I wasn't expecting much, just the standard stuff tied to Elliot's estate, but something's off, really off. I glanced toward the living room, lowered my voice. Define off. She exhaled through her nose, that sharp lawyer breath she always did when switching gears. The deed to this house. Elliot's house, the one you've been living in, is no longer in his name. Hasn't been for a month. I froze. That can't be right. I triple-checked. 4 weeks before he passed, the deed was transferred to a holding company called Halberd Investments, LLC. No public sale, no listing, just a straight quitclaim transfer. And guess who Halberd's listed manager is? My mouth went dry, Meredith Keene Lana said. Your mother. I leaned against the counter to keep from dropping. That's not possible. He was here. He never said anything about that. He didn't even have the strength to walk down the stairs by then. I figured. So I went further, got a copy of the transferred document. And Marin, the signature on it, Elliot's. Let me guess, I said quietly. It doesn't match. It doesn't just not match, she replied. It's dated during a week when your grandfather was in the ER. I pulled his hospital records. It was the same time he was admitted for a fall and put on morphine. I put my hand to my chest. I remembered that week too vividly. He couldn't hold a pen, let alone sign a full legal document. There's more, Lana added. The notary listed on the form. She's real. But she filed a complaint 2 months ago. Someone used her seal on a document she never saw. I pulled the case. Same signature style, same LLC. My knees buckled and I sank onto the kitchen stool, the ceramic tiles suddenly cold through my socks. They stole the house, I said. They moved it before they even let him die, Lana replied, voice low. And they were hoping no one would ever look close enough to notice. I stared out the window at the porch light glowing across the gravel. This house, this home, wasn't just real estate. It was where Eli learned to ride a bike, where Grandpa made him pancakes in the shape of Mickey Mouse ears, where we planted marigolds after the frost. It was where I rebuilt our lives from nothing, and they had erased it on paper, like we didn't exist. Okay, I said, finally my voice flat. What do? We go slow. Smart. I'm filing a motion to pause all probate proceedings until we can challenge the deed transfer. I'll submit a forensic handwriting analysis along with the medical timeline and the notary discrepancy, but they're going to fight it hard. Of course they are, I muttered. They're scared. You're not just a sentimental threat now, you're a legal one. And from the looks of this, they were hiding a lot more than just a will. Outside, the wind picked up. The old trees along the fence line rattled against the dark. I glanced over at Eli, still scribbling away, the tip of his tongue peeking out as he calculated fractions like it was life or death. They think I used him, I said quietly. What, Grandpa? That I manipulated a sick old man into giving me everything. That I played him for sympathy because he was a veteran. Lana didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was firmer than before. Let them talk. You've got the receipts, Marin. And I've got the bar license. This isn't about what they say, it's about what we can prove. For the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale. Because now, I knew. They weren't protecting Grandpa's memory, they were protecting a lie. I hadn't looked through the rest of the USB since finding the revised will. Between court prep, Eli's school schedule, and my own unraveling sense of reality, it had become just another to-do item floating in the margins of my life. But that night, long after Eli had gone to bed, and I'd stared blankly at half a rerun of some baking show, I opened my laptop and clicked through the folders again. There it was. A folder buried deep under system backups and old tax documents labeled in all caps, Private Only Marine. My breath caught. Inside were 2 files. One was a scanned copy of a letter I'd already seen, a short typed message from Grandpa to the estate lawyer instructing them to prepare a new deed and testament. The second was a video file, MP4, dated 7 months before he passed. I hesitated. The room felt too quiet all of a sudden. I turned down the lights, grabbed the blanket from the couch, and pressed play. The frame was steady, propped on the edge of his desk. The sun was coming in warm through the window behind him, casting golden stripes across the back wall. Grandpa was sitting in his chair wearing that same faded navy cardigan he always reached for when the house got drafty. His hands were folded in front of him. His eyes were clear, no morphine, no confusion, just Elliot Keene, fully present. If you're watching this, he began, then something's gone sideways. He gave a small, dry chuckle, the kind he used to make after finishing a crossword puzzle. I've asked Mr. Barnes to keep this file secure until after my passing. I don't know if this will hold up in court, but I want it on record. I want her to hear it from me. He leaned forward. The camera picked up the creak in his shoulder. Marion showed up, when no one else did. She took care of this place and me and that boy of hers like we were her own. And let me tell you, there were days I couldn't tell who was saving who. My throat tightened. I pressed a fist to my lips. She never asked for a dime, never demanded anything, just did what was right. So if you're wondering why the will was changed, why the house and the savings go to her and that grandson of mine, now you know. It's because they earned it, with quiet dignity, with presence. He took a breath. His voice wavered slightly but steadied again. Roy and Meredith are my children. I love them. But they've been absent for years, physically, emotionally. Declan. I haven't seen him since Eli was still in diapers, and I don't blame them for living their lives. But this house, this land, it belongs to the ones who stayed. Then came the pause. The one that always came when Grandpa was about to say something heavier than the room could carry. I know there will be talk, maybe even fighting. I know what they'll say about Marin, that she manipulated me, that I was confused. Let 'em talk. My mind's clearer than it's been in months, and if any judge wants proof, tell them to call the VA therapist I've been seeing every week for 2 years. They'll vouch for me. I'm not crazy. The camera shook slightly as he shifted forward. He looked directly into the lens. They'll try to erase her. Don't let them. Don't. The video ended there. No goodbye. Just a quiet fade into silence. I sat frozen for a long time, not crying, not moving, just stunned. Because now I wasn't angry at the forged documents or the stolen deed. I was furious at the deeper crime. They didn't just try to steal a house, they tried to erase a choice, a voice, a man. They wanted to rewrite the story of his final years, turn them into some half-lucid muddle, conveniently forgettable and legally dismissible. They wanted to make me look like a vulture. And worse, they were counting on no one ever finding this. I saved the file in 3 separate backups, one in the cloud, one on my laptop, one on an external drive I hadn't touched since Eli was born. Then, I sat in the dark for another hour staring at the place where his voice had just been, letting the weight of his words settle into something steel-like in my bones. They were going to fight dirty. But now, I had Grandpa's voice on my side, and no one was erasing him again. The kitchen table had become a war desk, legal pads stacked beside Lana's laptop, a thumb drive labeled Keen V, Keen balanced on the coaster where my coffee mug used to live. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, not unless you count Eli's leftover toaster waffles, and 3 spoonfuls of peanut butter, but the adrenaline of what we were building kept me moving. Lana sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a quick bun, eyes flicking between her screen and a pile of scanned signatures she'd printed and spread out like cards in a losing hand. These 2 are 3 months apart, supposedly both from Elliot, she said, tapping one. But the pressure points in the eyes are completely different. This one's smoother, almost lazy. The other looks like someone was trying too hard. She didn't have to say it. I could see it too. And then there's this, she added, flipping to another document. The metadata from the deed transfer file was created on a Friday, signed and notarized the same day, but the notary's official schedule shows she was out of state that week. So it's fabricated, I asked. Worse, it's orchestrated. She leaned back and cracked her neck. They didn't even try to be subtle. That makes them either desperate or stupid, maybe both. I didn't say anything for a while. Just stared at the grain in the wood beneath the legal folder, the one with my name typed clean and clinical in the corner, Marin Keen Respondent. Hey, Lana's voice softened. You okay? I nodded, but it was a lie. My hands were cold even though the room was warm. My stomach was tight with that same knot I used to feel when Eli had the flu and I was waiting for test results. I'm just tired of proving I belong here, I said finally. In a house I bathed my grandfather in a kitchen I cooked for him in. They left. I stayed. But I'm still the one they treat like an intruder. Lana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not the one on trial, Marin. They are. The next day, the letter arrived. It came by courier, an actual man in a pressed gray suit holding a manila envelope like it was radioactive. He didn't smile. Just confirmed my name, handed over the envelope, and left without a word. I opened it standing barefoot on the porch. 3 pages thick legal language, all dressed up with tone and threat. Cease and desist. Immediate vacancy demanded. Subject is occupying private property under false pretenses. They were accusing me of trespassing in the home my grandfather had left me, the home I'd nursed him in, the same house my name had been printed on in Elliot's own words. I scanned to the bottom. Signed not by my parents, but their attorney Vera Gant, probate and property litigation. A name I hadn't heard since college, but instantly recognized. She was the woman who once sued her own uncle over a backyard easement. Aggressive, sharp, known in probate circles for scorched earth tactics and zero tolerance for sentiment. Lana came over within the hour. She read the letter, then read it again, this time muttering legal jargon under her breath like a priest reciting a prayer backwards. They're trying to rattle you, she finally said. Make you second-guess your footing. But they have no legal ground. The title's in dispute, the will is contested, and your residency is protected under the revised documentation and the pending motion we filed. But if the sheriff shows up with an order, they won't, Lana interrupted. Not without a ruling. And by then, we'll be the ones asking the court for enforcement. Still, I slept with the chain lock on that night, and the night after. I double-checked the curtains, parked the car in the garage instead of the driveway. I didn't know what scared me more, the idea of losing the house or the quiet truth that maybe my family wasn't just greedy. Maybe they were cruel. Eli felt it too. He didn't say much, but he clung tighter when I tucked him in, asked questions like, are we going to have to move again? And did Grandma used to like me? I didn't have good answers, so I just kissed his forehead and said, I'm not going anywhere without you. Ever. Later that night, Lana and I finished compiling the folder we'd bring to court. Inside the video testimony forensic signature reports timeline of Elliot's medical condition, metadata screenshots, notary affidavits, and a copy of the cease and desist, because intimidation was just as telling as forgery. Lana labeled the file Exhibit A full contestation packet. Before she left, she turned to me at the door. They want to fight, Marin. They think you'll fold because you're the quiet one, the caretaker, the single mom, but they're forgetting something. What's that? You're the only one in this whole mess who actually showed up and courts. They notice who shows up. I nodded slowly. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that showing up might finally be enough. Courtrooms always look quieter on TV, but sitting there in the too cold air beneath the humming fluorescents and the flag that drooped slightly behind the bench, it felt more like a waiting room for a verdict no one wanted to name. My hands rested on my lap, fingers clenched around each other, nails pressing crescents into skin. My father took the stand before I was even fully braced for it. He wore the same charcoal suit I remembered from my high school graduation, the one he pulled out for events that mattered even if the people in them didn't. His tie was patriotic, red and blue stripes just wide enough to look intentional. He adjusted the mic once, cleared his throat, and leaned forward like he'd practiced. Your Honor, he began. My daughter took advantage of a sick, elderly man, her own grandfather. The courtroom shifted. Not a gasp. Not yet, but the kind of murmuring silence that tightens like a vice. She moved in under the pretense of caregiving, he continued, eyes never once meeting mine. But what she did was isolate him. She kept him away from the rest of the family. She controlled who saw him, what he heard, and then she made sure he changed his will. The judge, a wiry woman with tired eyes and a legal pad half filled, already raised a hand. Mr. Keene, please keep statements factual. He nodded. Fact, none of us saw the new will until after his death. Fact, Elliot Keene was a Korean War veteran with documented PTSD. Fact, Marin told everyone she was honoring his legacy, parading him around the neighborhood, veterans' brunches, like a mascot, using his story to boost her image in the community. My jaw tightened. I could feel Lana's hand grip my arm under the table, subtle but firm. Then came my mother's turn. Meredith Keene always had a theater voice, the kind that carried without raising volume, polished from decades of charity luncheons and parent board speeches. She stood, hair perfectly smoothed, a pearl brooch at her collar. Your Honor, with all respect, Marin has always been emotionally persuasive. She uses soft language, sentimentality. That's her gift. But that doesn't mean she had Elliot's best interests at heart. She turned, and for the first time, locked eyes with me. She weaponized his veteran status, made him feel obligated, guilty, convinced him she was the only one who cared. The judge scribbled something on her notepad. My chest burned. I could have spoken. I could have stood up and shouted that they hadn't called, hadn't visited, hadn't brought soup or blankets or time, that Eli had sat beside Grandpa every night reading old engineering magazines out loud while I changed dressings and scheduled his meds. But anything I said now would sound like noise. And they knew it. The damage wasn't in the accusation, it was in the doubt they planted. Then the judge looked up. I will say, she said carefully that the sudden emergence of a revised will coupled with the caretaking arrangement and the familial breakdown does raise questions, especially when dealing with elderly individuals with service-related mental health records. Lana stood. Your Honor, if I may. The judge gave a short nod. I have a sealed evidentiary folder, Lana said, calm but firm, containing time-stamped metadata, independent forensic analysis of Mr. Keene's digital assets, medical clearance statements from the VA clinic, and a direct video statement from Mr. Keene himself made prior to the revised will while in clear mental standing. She turned and took a single step forward. Then, slowly, deliberately, she placed the sealed folder on the judge's bench. The room froze. This, Lana said, is from Elliot Keene, and it speaks for itself. The judge didn't open it, not yet. She simply looked at the envelope, then at us. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Gavel slammed, papers shuffled, chairs scraped tile, but no one said a word, and for the first time, I watched my father's face falter. My mother gripped her purse too tightly, and my brother Declan refused to look at me at all. The courtroom was colder than the day before. Or maybe it was just me, my nerves dulling my skin, making everything feel distant and sharp at once. I sat beside Lana, her hand resting on a yellow legal pad covered in confident, precise notes. I hadn't slept much. Eli had a nightmare about being locked out of our house, and I spent half the night sitting beside his bed, brushing the hair from his forehead and whispering that no one was taking anything from us. Now I watched the judge unseal the folder. She didn't rush. She peeled back the flap with care like it was something delicate or dangerous. Inside the top page bore Lana's cover memo, evidentiary submissions regarding the revised will of Elliot James Keene. She read, silently, eyes flicking across the top sheets before pulling out the USB drive in its clear plastic sleeve. I'd like to view this, now, she said, not asking. She gave a short nod to the clerk who took the drive and moved to the side computer, connecting it with the kind of nervous precision reserved for things that could change the outcome of everything. The screen flickered, then cleared, and there he was. Elliot Keene, my grandfather, wearing his navy VFW polo and sitting in the sunroom light, dappling across his folded hands. He looked tired but alert, sharp. No slur to his voice, no confusion in his tone. His eyes were clear, steel gray like mine. If you're watching this, he began, it means I'm not around to say it to your face, so let me make it plain. I felt my heart clamp inside my chest. This house, this money, what's left of it, it goes to Marin and Eli. Because they showed up. They stayed. They never asked for anything. They just gave. No one moved. No one breathed. I'm not being coerced. I'm not confused. And if Meredith or Declan or anyone else tries to argue I wasn't in my right mind, let this be proof. I may be old, but I know what loyalty looks like. I heard someone in the gallery sniff quietly. I asked Marin not to tell anyone about this video unless it was necessary. So if you're seeing it, I'm guessing the snakes have come out. He gave a dry, almost bitter smile. I hope it stings. The screen went black. The judge looked back down at the folder, silent. She flipped through the attached VA documentation next. Date stamped, signed by Dr. Halloran Elliott's longtime physician. Mental capacity intact. Then came the revised will, dated 2 weeks after the video. Signed, witnessed, digitally filed, and time verified. And then, handwriting analysis. Lana had gone deep. 2 separate forensic reports. One confirming Elliott's signature, one disproving the signature on the property transfer that had placed the house in Halberd Investments' name. Last, transaction trails. The judge picked up the stapled packet and scanned it, frowning slightly. Halberd Investments? She murmured, eyes narrowing. She looked to the gallery. Ms. Keene, she said sharply. My mother flinched. Yes, Your Honor. Your name appears in association with this LLC, correct? There was a beat of silence. Then Meredith said, I handle some of the financial administration. You're the registered agent on file. The judge interrupted and listed as primary manager, which means you oversaw the use of this entity to secure property belonging to Elliot Keene just weeks before his death in contradiction to the revised will and without full disclosure to the estate. The air seemed to fold in on itself. Then the judge's voice dropped. Clear the courtroom. Now. The bailiff straightened. All non-essential personnel, please exit immediately. There was a rustle of disbelief, of nervous motion. People stood. Some stumbled. Even the court reporter paused, unsure. But the judge's face made it clear this wasn't for debate. I didn't move. Neither did Lana. Across the aisle, my mother had gone ghost white. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Declan's lawyer leaned in close, whispering something fast into his ear. His brows furrowed, then twitched. His hand gripped the edge of the bench. The judge spoke again, more quietly this time. We will be entering evidentiary review in chambers. Counsel, prepare your arguments. And Ms. Keene? She looked straight at me. Your grandfather's voice was compelling. Let's see what your family has to say in response. The courtroom emptied, but the silence it left behind was louder than anything I'd heard since this started. And as the heavy doors closed, I finally let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The folder had spoken. Now the walls were beginning to crack. Lana didn't say anything at first, not after court, not on the drive back, not even as we sat across from each other in her tiny home office, lit only by a desk lamp and the hum of her dual monitors. She just scrolled through spreadsheets, filings, corporate registries, her jaw tightening with each click. I sipped cold tea that had long since stopped pretending to be comforting and waited. I'd learned by now that when Lana went quiet, something ugly was surfacing. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. This was never just about your grandfather's house. I didn't speak, just watched her. She tapped her screen. Halberd Investments is one of 6 shell companies tied to a larger holding group, all of them registered out of the same P.O. box in Garden Springs. Guess who else is on 2 of the LLC filings? Don't say it. Your brother. And your mother. Different names, but same handwriting, same email trail if you know where to look. My mouth was dry. What are they doing with them? Lana pulled up a map. It was color-coded blue pins, yellow markers, and a series of red circles clustered around the outer edge of town. Then I saw it our street. Elliott's house. Circled in red, there's a developer, she said. Wickham Properties. They've been quietly acquiring homes around the historic district. Piece by piece. You know the town council's been trying to block any rezoning, right? Yeah, I said slowly. Because of the Veterans Memorial Corridor. Grandpa's house is part of that. Exactly. That's the crown jewel. No way to break the zoning protections without buying out the legacy properties, and yours was the last one standing. Or It would have been if Elliot hadn't revised his will. I blinked. So they were going to sell the house to a developer. Without telling anyone, they were going to flip it through Halberd. Clean title, big payout. My guess is the developer promised them a huge bonus for getting it done before the rezoning vote next quarter. It hit me like a wave, heavy, sickening. They weren't just erasing me, they were erasing him. Lana nodded, face grim. Elliot wasn't just a retired engineer or a veteran. He was a legacy figure in that neighborhood. His presence gave it historical weight. They knew that, and they tried to turn him into a liability so they could cash him out. I stood, pacing the small room, and the accusations, me manipulating him, me using his service to gain sympathy, that was them preemptively poisoning the well. Exactly, Lana said. They needed to discredit you, cast doubt on the will, and make it look like you exploited him. If they could paint you as unstable or opportunistic, they could argue that the original will, dividing everything equally, was the only fair one. I sat again, slower this time. And if they win, they won't, Lana cut in. Not if I can help it. But you need to know what we're really up against. She swiveled her laptop around and pulled up a payment ledger. Large transfers. Discrete accounts. Each one tagged with memo lines like consultation or property services. But the dates matched perfectly with Elliot's last months alive and with Halberd's paperwork. They were already spending the money, she said. They thought the deal was done. The silence sat thick between us. Marin Lana said quietly, "This isn't a family squabble over an estate anymore. It's a cover-up. It's coordinated fraud. And it's real estate corruption. If this goes public..." I looked up. "Will it hurt? Eli?" She paused. "I don't think they'll come after him, but they might come after you. Personally, professionally." I exhaled slowly. Then, let them. I'm not handing over the home my son took his first steps in, or letting my grandfather's legacy be paved over for a shopping plaza. Lana nodded. "Good, because we're not walking away. But from now on, every step we take has to be airtight, clean, strategic." I gave a small, humorless laugh. That's how Grandpa would have wanted it. Lena's lips twitched at the corner. Engineer's granddaughter. Single mom with no patience for snakes, I corrected. She reached for another folder. "Then let's build your defense like a bridge. One steel beam at a time." And as I looked at the map again, red pins glowing like warning lights around the place I called home, I realized this wasn't about inheritance at all. This was about power, and I wasn't letting them take it. The deeper we dug, the more it stank. Lana and I split tasks like we were back in college cramming for finals, except this time, the stakes weren't grades. They were land titles, federal codes, and what was left of my grandfather's legacy. We started with the renovation permits tied to Halberd investments. Lana ran them through the county system while I scoured archived planning board minutes. What we found made my skin crawl. Permits filed for historical exterior upgrades on multiple properties Halberd had acquired. Except the renovations never happened. No scaffolding, no construction crews, just forged inspection stamps and budget sheets showing tens of thousands spent on phantom labor. "That's fraud," I muttered. Lana nodded. "It's worse. These fake upgrades are being used to inflate property values on paper. It makes it look like Halberd's properties are thriving assets, not placeholders for a developer's buyout, which helps them justify the inflated sales price once they flip it to Wickham," I said. She leaned in. "Guess who signed off on the independent appraisals?" I didn't have to guess. "Declan. Declan's firm," she confirmed. 3 separate shell appraisal companies, all linked to the same IP address as his brokerage. I leaned back in the creaky chair, the truth unraveling faster than I could absorb. They planned everything. They didn't just take Grandpa's house, they built a whole web to profit off it. "And they almost got away with it," Lana said. "If you hadn't found that USB, the revised will would have never surfaced." I rubbed my temple. "It's not just business, it's family, I couldn't find the word. It's betrayal dressed as paperwork." She hesitated, then clicked open a new document. There's more. My stomach dropped. A whistleblower, Lana said. Someone inside the city council leaked this last night. It was a scanned email, short curt. The subject line read, "Audit pending. Tell M to clean her tracks." The sender's name was redacted, but the body of the message was clear enough. Meredith had been warned. A quiet audit of Halberd was on the horizon, and instead of cooperating, she'd used the heads up to bury the evidence. She knew the heat was coming, Lana said, and instead of stopping, she accelerated. I stared at the screen. How long has this been going on? Halberd was formed 2 years ago. But the land grab started just after Elliot's last hospitalization. That timing pierced deeper than anything else. While I was helping Grandpa out of bed, filing his insurance paperwork, trying to get Eli to sleep through the night, my own mother was prepping to erase everything he built. We sat in silence, the weight of it all thick in the room. A knock came at the door. Not a knock, exactly, more like a single tap followed by silence. Lana tensed. I stood slowly. No one was there when I opened it, just a manila envelope on the welcome mat. No postage, no return address, just my name in bold, blocky letters. Marin. I carried it inside like it might burn through my hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, notarized. Dated 6 months prior, it was a sworn statement from Gerald L. Winscombe, a name I hadn't heard in years. Grandpa's old estate attorney. I read the lines aloud, heart-thudding. I, Gerald L. Winscombe-esque, confirm that Elliot Green revised his will in June 20XX, designating full transfer of property and liquid assets to his granddaughter Marin Keene and her son Elijah Keene. I personally witnessed and signed the updated will. Approximately 1 month later, I was approached by Meredith Keene and Declan Keene, who informed me the updated will was fabricated. Under pressure and fearing professional harm, I destroyed my retained copy. I regret this deeply. There was a signature, a seal, a contact number. Lana let out a low whistle. That is the nail in the coffin. They knew it was real, I whispered. They knew, she echoed, and they made him destroy the copy. I swallowed hard. Then why now? Why send this to me? Lana took the page from my hands, eyes narrowing. Because someone's finally scared, and scared people don't lie quietly. I stared at the door, my mind racing. My mother, my brother, the city council, the fake permits, the appraisals, the real estate trails, they all led here. But this envelope, it meant one thing more dangerous than anything else. There was someone inside their circle willing to turn, and that meant the house wasn't just mine to defend anymore. It was evidence. When people talk about war, they think about soldiers and sand and guns. My grandfather used to say, the real ones, the wars that leave you bleeding the longest, don't always start with uniforms. Sometimes they start with paperwork, with people you love rewriting truth like it's a line item. And sometimes they start right inside your home. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching the evening light slant across the floorboards, Grandpa refinished with his own hands. There was a groove near the stove where I used to rock Eli in the sling while stirring lentil soup. A nick in the counter where Elliot once dropped a wrench trying to fix the broken cabinet hinge, muttering that engineering in a kitchen was the truest test of patience. That same counter had held school permission slips, overdue bills, and 100 quiet dinners. This wasn't just a house. It was proof of every year I didn't give up. When I moved back in, I was 26 heart-bruised broke and terrified. Eli was too, and had a scream like a fire engine when his molars came in. His father had bailed before the birth, left nothing behind but a muttered excuse and a name I scrubbed off every document I could. I showed up on Grandpa's porch in the rain, clutching Eli in one arm and my shame in the other. I never even had to knock. He opened the door, saw me drenched and shaking, and said only, "Let's get you dry." He didn't ask questions. Just cleared out the guest room, stocked the pantry with apple juice boxes, and fixed the old swing set in the backyard. The second night I found a handwritten schedule taped to the fridge nap, times, bath reminders, little notes like, "Let the boy make a mess." It's how he learns. Over time, Elliot and Eli became their own little team. I'd catch them in the garden, Eli squatting beside Grandpa in his oversized rubber boots, both of them digging holes for green beans with the same bent-back focus. One fall afternoon, I walked out to see Grandpa teaching him how to prune the azaleas, and Eli nodded solemnly like he was being briefed by NASA. "We trim," gently Elliot said, "because even tough plants don't like rough hands." He taught him patience, precision, the power of showing up daily even when no one clapped. Once, when Grandpa caught pneumonia, I sat up through the night listening to his coughing echo through the hallway. And then I heard a softer sound, bare feet on hardwood. I peeked into the bedroom and found Eli, 6 years old, kneeling on the chair beside his bed, spooning warm broth into Grandpa's mouth like it was sacred. He'd even laid a towel over his lap so the soup won't spill on the covers. That was the night I stopped feeling like a failure. Not because of what I did, but because of who Eli was becoming. Not in spite of our hard life, but because of it. Now that same house, the one where Eli learned kindness, where I learned resolve, was being passed around like a poker chip in a crooked game. My own mother sat in court and called it a transaction, called me manipulative, called Grandpa's love for us convenient. She didn't know what it meant to earn someone's trust, not through bloodlines, but through effort. Through dinner reheated at midnight, bills paid with tip money, and bedtimes told by old clocks with fading batteries. Lana called it property under dispute. They called it an asset, but I knew the truth. This house made me a mother. Not the diapers or the lullabies or the endless nights, but the quiet anchoring, the security of 4 walls that never once judged me for being alone. The man inside those walls who saw me, believed in me when no one else did, gave me more than shelter. He gave me a reason to keep standing, and now they were trying to rip it away with strategy and suits and whispers behind closed doors. But this wasn't their war to win. I wasn't just fighting for a deed anymore. I was fighting for the life I built brick by brick, spoon by spoon, day by day, and I wasn't walking away. It's strange how power shifts. 1 month ago, I was standing alone in a courtroom, clutching a folder like a shield, unsure if anyone would believe me. Now I sat in Lana's apartment, her dining table buried under a sea of color-coded folders, USB drives, notarized affidavits, and an open laptop displaying a spreadsheet I barely understood but knew could change everything. Lana leaned back, finger-steepled eyes scanning a printout with surgical focus. "This," she said, tapping the corner, "is where it gets criminal." She turned the document toward me, a compiled trail of transactions pulled from Halberd Investments' hidden ledger. A handful of wire deposits, each one neat and round and just under the reporting threshold, had flowed into an account we traced to Meredith. The payments aligned perfectly with supposed improvement projects around town, none of which existed. And, most damningly, one of those payments had cleared just days before Elliot passed. They sold the future, Lana said, before he even had a funeral. My stomach clenched, but I didn't flinch. I'd stopped flinching weeks ago. We added that ledger to the growing stack. Then came the email, an anonymous message that popped up in Lana's encrypted inbox at 2:07 a.m. She'd forwarded it to me the next morning, and we sat together, rereading it in silence. It came from someone using the alias Cedar Clerk. They identified themselves as a city records employee and described a pattern of irregular approvals processed late at night, always involving permits for historic homes, including Elliot's. The permits bore digital signatures from a council member who, according to metadata, hadn't been in the system that night. Spoofed credentials. Someone was laundering legitimacy. The email ended with, "I've seen enough to know someone's hiding rot, but I'm not brave enough to go public. Maybe you are." We were. Lana organized the timeline, the last legal revision of Elliot's will, the chain of custody logs from the external hard drive, where his video had been stored and backed up twice. Both time-stamped the forensic report from a digital security firm verifying no tampering. "We need more than emotional weight," she said. "We need procedural clarity. We need this to scream credibility." I spent that week doing what I never thought I would, revisiting old memories, not for comfort, but for evidence. The meals we made, the meetings I'd driven Elliot to, the days I'd signed for his prescriptions. Receipts, calendars, the old home camera system we thought had stopped working, but still had backup footage tucked into its cloud account. Lena's eyes lit up when she saw the dates on the login activity. "This proves continuity," she said. "That you were there, that he trusted you, that this wasn't some last-minute manipulation." By Friday evening, our final binder was ready. Chain of a custody check, metadata trail check, independent analysis from 2 credentialed experts check, real estate corruption pattern check, anonymous whistleblower alert with traceable origin check, and a final affidavit from Elliot's former lawyer whose conscience had finally overcome his fear. We didn't include the original email with his signature line, but the scanned, notarized statement was there. They knew the updated will existed. They pressured me to lose my copy. I regret complying. Lana closed the binder with a soft thud. This isn't just a probate case anymore. It's fraud. It's conspiracy. It's state level. She had already drafted the petition. As the legal guardian named in the revised will, and with Elliot's notarized video as corroboration, I had standing to request a formal fraud investigation. Lana was filing it Monday morning, but she looked me in the eye before she left and said, "You need to be ready. If the state picks this up, it won't just be about the house. Your mother could face indictment. Declan, too." I didn't respond right away. I walked to the kitchen, poured some orange juice into one of Elliot's old glasses, and stared out the window toward the garden. The azaleas had bloomed early this year, bright and unbothered. "They did this to themselves," I finally said. She nodded. "Then let's help the system catch up." That night, after Eli went to bed, I sat at the table and watched the binder in front of me. It didn't look like a weapon, but I knew it was. A quiet war wrapped in vinyl and evidence tabs. Not a scream, not a fist, just the truth finally organized. And we were just getting started. The courthouse parking lot was fuller than I'd ever seen it. Rows of sedans, pickup trucks, a few familiar faces from the neighborhood, milling near the steps, murmuring over coffee cups. Word had spread. Not just about the will, about the fraud, about the investigation. I didn't dress to impress, just a simple navy dress hair tied back Elliot's old pocket watch, tucked in my bag like a talisman. Lana walked beside me, holding the binder like it was holy. Eli had begged to come, but I told him no. "This part's for grown-ups," I'd said, "and for people who weren't afraid to speak the truth." The courtroom buzzed when we entered. I caught glimpses of city officials in the back row. 2 local reporters, a woman from the Historical Society who'd always baked Elliot pies in the spring. The judge glanced up briefly, then gestured for everyone to be seated. Meredith was already at the front, sitting stiffly beside her counsel face like stone. She didn't look at me. Declan leaned back in his seat, trying to radiate calm, but his tie was crooked and his jaw clenched every few seconds like clockwork. Lana stood first, calm as ever. "Your Honor," she said, "we are submitting new evidence in accordance with the court's continued probate deliberations and under the advisory of the State Fraud Unit who received our petition last week." She laid the binder on the evidence table. The judge raised an eyebrow and gestured for the clerk to bring it over. As the clerk approached the bench, Declan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to remind the court that much of this was submitted without proper advance notice." The judge raised a hand. "Let's see what we're dealing with before we argue process." Pages turned. Lana narrated each piece, calm, firm, unemotional. Chain of custody logs, metadata, verification, third-party expert analyses, whistleblower correspondence, and finally the affidavit from Elliot's former attorney. Each document a brick, together a wall. Still, neither of them looked at me. When the judge paused, I stood. "I have one more thing, Your Honor." The judge nodded. I stepped forward, pulled out the USB drive, and plugged it into the provided laptop. Lana had queued it up already. The courtroom fell silent as the video began. Elliot sat on his porch, the early evening sun casting stripes across his weathered face. He looked directly at the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, "then someone's trying to pretend I didn't say what I said, that I didn't decide what I decided." His voice was clear. No hesitation, no confusion. Marin showed up when no one else did. Eli helped me plant tomatoes. They didn't ask for anything, they just stayed. This house is theirs. It was always supposed to be. Don't let anyone say different. Someone in the courtroom coughed. Someone else sniffed. The video ended. I waited a beat. Then I turned toward the judge, but not before facing my family. Meredith's eyes were down. Declan looked at me like I'd betrayed him. I suppose that's what truth feels like to people used to rewriting it. "You erased me," I said quietly, because you thought it would be cleaner. Because admitting I mattered to Elliot to the legacy would mess with the image. You said I was manipulative, that I exploited him. But I didn't use a veteran to get sympathy. I honored one. I fed him, bathed him, buried him. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth. And the truth is, he chose me. Not because I'm loud, not because I'm perfect, but because I showed up when no one else did. And that should have been enough for all of us. The judge leaned forward. "This court recognizes the updated will as valid," he said. "We are suspending prior distributions and transferring the estate into the named beneficiary's custody pending full fraud review by the appropriate authorities." The gavel fell once firm final. Declan stood abruptly. "It was a misunderstanding," he barked. Meredith flinched. The judge didn't even look up. Court adjourned. As people filed out, no one looked me in the eye except Lana. She squeezed my shoulder. "You did it." "No," I said. "He did." Outside, the spring breeze had returned. I took the pocket watch from my bag and clicked it open. Still ticking. Just like me. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Gold seal, heavy paper. The kind that makes you sit down before opening it like your hands already know it's something that might change the air in the room. I read the verdict twice. Once, quickly, eyes scanning for the words I needed. Valid. Transfer of title, investigation pending. Then again, slower, letting the weight of it settle in my chest, like gravel finally laid in place. Lana called that afternoon. "It's over," she said. At least the legal part. But it wasn't over. Not really, because even when a courtroom tells the truth, some people keep rewriting it in their heads. 2 days later, I stood in the living room of the house I'd fought for Elliot's house. My house. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains. The chair he used to sit in was still there, worn and waiting. The floorboards groaned in familiar protest as I stepped through the hall, hand grazing the edge of the banister Eli had helped him sand down one summer. But the place didn't feel like home anymore. Not after what it had cost to claim it. There were no boxes, no suitcases. Just me, one photo of Elliot and Eli at the garden bed, and the deed Lana had overnighted, notarized, and sealed. I left it on the kitchen counter. "Are you sure Lana asked when I called her that evening? You fought for this." "I did," I said. "But I wasn't fighting to live here. I was fighting to make sure they couldn't erase him. And they wouldn't. Not now." The state opened an official fraud inquiry 2 weeks later. Meredith's attorney issued a no comment. Declan took down his real estate website overnight. City Council announced an audit. And quietly, without a press release, the zoning proposal that would have gutted the historical district was withdrawn. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want a house. I wanted something that mattered. Something that echoed the man who taught me integrity wasn't about winning, it was about staying when everyone else left. The land had value, more than money, more than a plaque. So I sold the house, not to a developer, not for profit. I called in every contact I had, veterans groups, nonprofits, a few community leaders who remembered Elliot not as a decorated veteran, but as the guy who repaired their porch steps for free, who ran the food drive on snowy weekends. We filed the paperwork under a new foundation. I used every cent I had from the inheritance. Lana helped draft the legal structure. Eli painted the first welcome sign by hand. And 1 year later, we opened the doors. The Keene Center for Veterans and Families stood on the same lot. The porch was new, but it faced the same sunrise. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs for transitional housing, a community kitchen, counseling offices, a childcare room, and a garden out back with tomatoes already sprouting. The day of the dedication, I stood by the bronze plaque embedded near the gate. It was simple, just a name, a set of dates, and one line beneath it. He showed up when it mattered. Eli tugged at my hand. "Is it weird," he asked, "to give it away?" "No," I said. "It's the first thing that's felt right in a long time." Volunteers passed by, carrying folding chairs. A local reporter snapped photos. An elderly couple walked through the garden path with the woman whispering. My brother served in Korea too, but I stayed still, just long enough to let the moment register, not for the cameras, not for the press release, just for me. Behind me, the house had changed. The air had shifted. But Elliot hadn't gone anywhere. Not really. His memory wasn't sealed in wood or brick. It was stitched into the way the doors stayed open, the way the welcome mat was worn, the way every corner of that space told someone they were wanted. Someone had once said I used a veteran to gain sympathy. But as I stood there, Eli slipping his hand into mine, the sun warming our faces, I finally had the answer. They said I used a veteran, but all I ever did was honor him